New York City, July 22nd, 1988, 10 Gracie Square. In one of the most exclusive penthouses in Manhattan, a mother is watching her son. He is 23 years old, handsome, a Princeton graduate, and the heir to a name that once ruled America. But as Carter Vanderbilt Cooper stands on the edge of the 14th floor terrace, he isn't looking at the view. He is looking at the end. His mother, the legendary Gloria Vanderbilt, pleads with him. She screams, she begs, she watches as her son teeters on the edge. In a moment that would haunt her for the rest of her life, Carter looks back at her, waves a final goodbye, and lets go. In that split second, the Vanderbilt legacy didn't just lose a son, it lost its future. Carter Cooper's death was a shock to the world. He had everything, money, status, and beauty. But his suicide revealed a dark truth about the Vanderbilt dynasty. The silver spoon was sometimes a choking hazard. While the public saw a life of privilege, the family was drowning in a sea of grief, loss, and a fortune that was disappearing as fast as their lives were falling apart. For his younger brother, Anderson Cooper, this wasn't just a headline. It was the moment he realized that his family name was a ghost. To understand why a Vanderbilt prince would choose to end it all, we have to look past the mansions and the yachts. We have to go back to the beginning, to the ruthless man who built this golden cage and the curse he unknowingly left behind. The Commodore's ruthless empire. To understand the fall of Carter Vanderbilt, we have to look at the man who built the pedestal he fell from, Cornelius Vanderbilt. They called him the Commodore. He didn't start with a silver spoon. He started with a borrowed $100 and a small boat. He was crude, uneducated, and arguably the most ruthless man to ever walk Wall Street. Cornelius didn't just want to win, he wanted to annihilate. When rivals tried to undercut his shipping business, he didn't sue them. He famously wrote, "I won't sue you, for the law is too slow. I will ruin you." And he did. He crushed the competition, monopolized the steamships, and then, in a stroke of genius, he sold it all to bet on the future, the railroads. He built the Grand Central Depot in New York. He connected the East to the West. By the time he was finished, Cornelius Vanderbilt owned the veins and arteries of America. He became the richest man in the world, worth over $100 million in 1877, more money than the entire U.S. Treasury at the time. He was the Prince of Wall Street, a god of industry. But as a father, he was a tyrant. The Commodore believed that for his empire to survive, his heirs had to be as cold and calculated as he was. He bullied his sons, calling them blockheads and fools. He treated his family like a corporation, and his love was a dividend that was rarely paid. He left his fortune to only one son, William Henry, with a simple, haunting command: keep the money together. William did as he was told. He doubled the fortune, but the seeds of destruction were already planted. The generations that followed didn't inherit the Commodore's grit, they only inherited his gold. And they were about to embark on the most expensive, most reckless spending spree the world had ever seen. The Gilded Cage and the Spending Spree. If Cornelius Vanderbilt built the empire with iron and sweat, his grandchildren decorated it with gold and silk. In less than 20 years after the Commodore's death, the Vanderbilt name moved from the docks of New York to the ballrooms of high society. They weren't railroad kings anymore, they were American royalty. And royalty doesn't save money, they spend it. They built cottages that were actually palaces with 70 rooms. They imported marble from Italy, wood from France, and tapestries from the Orient. Alva Vanderbilt, the wife of the Commodore's grandson, spent $3 million, in 1883 money, just to throw a single costume ball. It was a competition of ego. They weren't investing in railroads anymore. They were investing in being noticed. The goal wasn't to keep the money together. It was to see who could build the biggest monument to themselves. But behind the gold leaf walls, the foundation was rotting. The family was growing larger, and the fortune was being sliced into smaller and smaller pieces. While they were busy hosting princes and dukes, the world was changing. The age of the railroad was ending, and the age of the automobile was beginning. But the Vanderbilts were too busy dancing to notice the engine of their wealth was running out of steam. By the third generation, the Commodore's warning was forgotten. One of his grandsons, Alice Vanderbilt, famously said, "It is not what we have, but what we enjoy that constitutes our abundance." They enjoyed everything until there was nothing left to enjoy. The money that took a lifetime to build was being burned at both ends, and soon the greatest fortune in the world would become the greatest cautionary tale in history. The gilded cage was beautiful, but it was still a cage, and for the next generation the bars were starting to close in. The money was drying up, and the tragedy we saw on that 14th floor terrace was already beginning to take root in the family's soul. The 10-generation curse and little Gloria. In 1973, 120 descendants of Cornelius Vanderbilt gathered for a family reunion at Vanderbilt University. It should have been a celebration of power, but when the dust settled, a shocking reality emerged. Out of those 120 heirs, not one of them was a millionaire. The billion-dollar empire had been liquidated, spent, and taxed into oblivion. The gold was gone, and in its place was a curse that seemed to target the youngest and most vulnerable. This brings us to the most famous Vanderbilt of the 20th century, Gloria. Known to the world as Poor Little Gloria, at just 10 years old, she was the centre of the trial of the century. Her mother and her aunt fought over her custody, not because they loved her, but because whoever controlled Gloria controlled her $5 million trust fund. She was a child treated like a bank account, growing up in a world of luxury but starved for real affection. Gloria won the trial, but she lost her childhood. She grew up in a gilded vacuum, searching for the love she never received from her parents. She married 4 times, always looking for an anchor in the Vanderbilt storm. And when she finally had her own children, Carter and Anderson, she tried to build a different life for them. She wanted them to be more than just their last name. She wanted them to be survivors. But as we saw on that 14th floor balcony, the shadows of the past were too long to escape. Carter Vanderbilt Cooper, the golden boy, couldn't handle the weight. The pressure of being a Vanderbilt, combined with a fragile mind, led to the final, tragic exclamation point of the family's downfall. The money was gone, the mansions were gone, and now the heirs were disappearing too. Gloria would later tell Anderson, "Money is a strange thing. It can buy you anything, but it can't protect you from yourself." The Vanderbilt fortune was a wildfire. It gave them warmth for a moment, but it eventually burned everything they touched to the ground. The last Vanderbilt, and new legacy. When Gloria Vanderbilt passed away in 2019, she left behind a legacy of art, fashion, and survival. But for Anderson Cooper, the most valuable thing he inherited wasn't a bank account or a deed to a mansion. It was a clear understanding of the Vanderbilt curse. He realized that a fortune built on ruthlessness and maintained by ego is a house of cards destined to fall. He chose a different path. He didn't wait for a trust fund. He built a career from the mud of war zones to the lights of primetime news. Anderson often says that the idea of inherited wealth is a initiative sucker. He watched his brother Carter succumb to the pressure, and he watched his mother struggle with the ghosts of her childhood. By the time it was his turn, the billion-dollar vault was empty, and he wouldn't have had it any other way. For the first time in 5 generations, a Vanderbilt wasn't defined by what he spent, but by what he earned. The Vanderbilt story began with a man who wanted to own the world, and it ends with a man who simply wants to report on it. It is a 200-year cycle of greed, gold, and grief. From the ruthless piers of New York to the tragic balcony of Gracie Square, the family proves that the greatest wealth is not what you keep in your pockets, but what you keep in your heart after everything else is gone. The mansions are museums now, the railroads are history, the billions are dust. But the lesson remains for all who seek the upper-class life. Be careful what you build, for your children will have to live inside it. And sometimes the most expensive cage is the one made of gold. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe to stay in the loop with our next Insider Stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. What part resonated with you the most?